Hello and welcome to our very first hurling Gaago analysis show. Over the next few weeks, we'll do our best to find some of the key clips that happened over the Hurling Championship, the good, the bad and the ugly. But before we get stuck into some of the material, I have the great pleasure and honour of welcoming a man that actually went to Clare for school, but he's a Limerick man and he is adored by all GA folk. I'm delighted to welcome Séamus Hickey to the show.
Great to be with you, Dr. Connors. Looking forward to getting stuck into the games. It's a brilliant weekend of hurling. It's lovely to get the chance to look underneath it.
Absolutely, and I suppose the weather also played its part there. Maybe just to offer some context, we will show a little image of Séamus from a couple of years ago. So, Séamus, can you give us some insight into this?
That's the least famous is in the middle. We weren't a move with Hector, but we were in Boston for the Gaago launch. I think it was 2014.
That is correct.
We were showing the Americans how to hit slitters, and they thought that we were expert forwards. We just ignored to tell them that we were cornerbacks in disguise. But that was a great trip. Yeah, that was
hard to believe it's nearly 10 years ago.
That's unbelievable.
And I suppose it was the first kind of introduction to Gaago as a concept. So it was really nice. I give you a bonus point. What was the name of the conference?
It's some Irish. It was like it's some Irish cultural festival. What was it? iFest. I got it in the end.
10 years ago this September. Hard to believe. Okay, so without further ado, let's get stuck into some of the content. So we had the pleasure of obviously meeting each other in Welsh Park on Sunday. You told me you unfortunately didn't have a plan on the way down, which is a bit of an issue, but we'll sort it out in the coming weeks. So let's start with looking at some of the Cork and Waterford match. One of the key things that I felt myself from watching the match, and I'm hoping that you'll feed into it also, is really about like how Waterford is set up in terms of their puckouts, the variety they had, but also how they structure them. So we might roll some of the clips and we might even talk through them and just discuss them. So obviously here is the space inside. This is actually 1 minute and like 20 seconds of the match. It was the goal. It was Waterford's first puckout. But the key thing here was the space. So if we look at the space on the top left-hand side of the screen, and then we obviously see Jamie coming onto the ball. Now, Jamie, ironically enough, started wing forward on Coleman. So he obviously knew at that stage that he was going to create space inside and then loop around. And luckily for us, it was a goal. This is another option here where we have our forwards going wide. We see Mikey Kiley, who was actually centre forward, literally sitting back on the full forward line, trying to create space. So that's another option.
I love this because this to me was the example. It felt like Waterford knew what they were doing on Sunday, way more than last year. Last year it looked like it was pieced together. This, the forwards moving out, giving room for Kiley, and then the ball straight down the middle. Like I liked the idea, and the execution was really good.
And even in this one here, like this is a middle option. So we've seen long ones. This is a middle option where Waterford have actually kind of come together slightly in the middle, and we'll see more examples in a second. But because they're coming into the centre more, it actually allows you also to go with mid-range shots into the middle. Here is an example that I'm saying as well. So as you can see, the keeper with the hands up. Traditionally, Séamus, what does hand up mean?
Long bomb.
Hands up. Our two cornerbacks actually were Mark Fitz and Caleb Lyons at the time. They ran 30 yards and sprinted back the field as options.
Yeah.
Again, straight down the middle, as you can see, everybody is in a line here. But if you look at the room on each side, it actually allows Waterford to make decisions on who's going to run and who's going to get the ball.
And that's so unusual, right? So in a kind of a veteran half back line, you don't converge into the centre. You normally hold out on the wings. And then that space then makes it really dangerous. And Waterford exploited it. I saw they exploited it multiple times.
Here's the same thing again. We can even see it. This is Jamie Barron making a run. Again, from deep, but because everybody was more or less lined up in the middle, it actually allows you to go and make the run. Because Sean O'Brien has actually a really accurate strike and it's a really low trajectory, it actually allows him to hit the ball into space, knowing that the forwards are actually going to get there.
Yeah, it's very Limerick-esque. And almost when we look back to what Davy Fitz did with those Clare teams, 13, 14, 15, he had them bunch in the middle and then break out. And then the dilemma then was for the half-back line, right, do we hold shape here, or do we risk overloads of 3 versus 2, 2 versus 1? But that looks way more organised. And
it's kind of like a football thing. Like, if you watch the football when they're lined up for kickouts, they kind of all kind of go static in the middle and then they break.
Yeah, and that's you could defend that zonally, but to me, a lot of the time is the options you create off of it. So it's never the same thing over and over again.
But also, as a back, you can actually in that situation afford to stand on the outside of your players.
Yeah.
Because they're not going to just puck it in the middle. If you puck it in the middle, there's so many bodies there that you should be able to get your hands on the ball. But if you go onto the outside, it also gives you that kind of bit of freedom that you're kind of the zone.
And I'd be surprised if that works against the likes of a Limerick or a Clare. And that reminds me, against Clare last year. So when you contrast what they did successfully on Sunday versus what last year felt like, repeating the same thing with no results. So we've got Billy Nolan goals here, which is the key difference. His puck out length wasn't the same as O'Brien's. And you're talking about a Clare half back line who are far more experienced and even far stronger with Conlon, McInerney, Ryan. So you can see it over and over again. Billy launches ball down, but look at the Clare setup 4-1. Conlon comes away with the ball. It's the kind of thing last year that the Waterford faithful found frustrating. It's the kind of thing that they.
But even watching that clip, Séamus, how he was striking that ball, he was looking for air rather than trajectory. Yeah. And as a back, if a ball is looping in, that's your bread and butter stuff.
And then you don't have Mikey Kiley either. So Mikey Kiley and Jack Prendergast were absolutely exceptional one-on-one winning ball. And you got the two hands up here. You can know where the ball is going here with Billy Nolan. So it's long.
But there's options in that one down the middle. As you can see there, you have an option down the middle, but there was options there.
Yeah, and that game, Clare were 15 points up before the end of that game, and they coasted to the end. So it was one of those where it was a systems failure for Clare, for Waterford. You see what they did in an organised, well executed way against Cork. That is that's a complete difference from last year. Now that's obviously the squad been together longer, been with Davy longer, and I suppose also the personnel like Mikey Kiley and Jack I thought were super. Against
and I think they offer something different. But even going back to it, I think that what Waterford done really well was they allowed themselves to get themselves one-on-one. Whereas you look at that, it was 4-on-4. That's really a back situation. Whereas if it's a 1v1 and the forward is dictating the space and dictating where the ball is going to go to, well, you're then pushing it from a 50-50 ball to a 70-30 ball in favour of the forward.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I would say that they're going to have to keep repeating that to be, they've got the week off now to prepare for Tipperary coming in 2 weeks, but they're going to have to repeat that, given defenses dilemmas. So dilemmas is a situation, they mention it in sport all the time. So there's no right answer. There's normally 2 negative outcomes and you have to pick the least bad. All right, so that's what you're trying to do, is trying to create dilemmas. You're trying to create depth runs. Do I follow the man out and leave the space, or do I cover the space and leave the man? That's the kind of stuff you're trying to create.
That's something that we'll talk about in the next set of clips. But on the zonal play, Cork's setup for puckouts were in complete contrast to what we actually expect them to be. And Waterford, on the other hand, had done what Cork traditionally do. And maybe it was the zonal play that Waterford decided to go with. And we have a couple of clips here on, well, I suppose we focus primarily on Tadhg de Búrca, which is here highlighted. But many occasions, Montgomery midfield, Caleb Lyons, Darragh Lyons literally sat into space and actually stopped the ball going into the full back line. So as we can see here, Tadhg, this is actually a sideline. Tadhg operates obviously as a spare man. He sits back into the hole. Most people in that instance will actually nearly come to the full back and sit in front of the full back, so he's not in trouble. Instead, Tadhg is actually looking around him all the time and actually runs to the space on the other side. So you can even see him here out of the picture, because you can see Cork are well marshalled. But he decides, you know what, I'm an option here if we get a chart, or I could pick up the ball myself. So as you see, he's out of frame, he comes in, and he picks up the ball.
It's just pure intelligence, and it's what, if people are trying to quantify what makes him such a good zone marker, that's him. It's just his ability to identify the space is more dangerous than the corridor that's got the people in it. I love watching him.
And even if we look at this clip in particular, so this is zonal. You see, Caleb Lyons will sit on the outside. He wants to actually stand on the outside because he knows that Tadhg is on the inside. So that's our zonal part. But Tadhg knows that he has loads of room on the right-hand side because Leanne they're bringing, who was at the time, Darragh Lyons for a run down the pitch. So Tadhg says, you mark, I'll go into the zone here. And as you can see, picks up the ball. He actually has enough time to hit it on his hurley twice and then strike it in.
Yeah, I love it. You can see the point as well. The communication is massive. When you've got that spare man, you have to hand off in half second. Otherwise, you both look stupid when your spare man gets the ball.
And that is the key thing. As you can see, it's the same thing here. Tadhg knows that we have bodies in the middle, and he's happy enough for it to go in the middle. But he's very mindful of the fact he needs to protect the lads inside. He goes to a certain point and then steps back into the space.
Yeah. I felt bad for Patrick Collins at times as well. Like, the movement wasn't there. Like, he hit that down right down top of Tadhg, but there wasn't much movement anywhere else.
This is the one that probably killed Cork more than most. Now, I know that at the time, I think we had an extra man, maybe two. But Tadhg is literally sitting, marking nobody, making Cork decide to either go on his side, which he obviously has a cover, or go on the other side where they have bodies and they're all tight. Because he goes into the space, it actually allows Waterford to go touch tight, but also allows you to be a bit more kind of aggressive. So at times, if you're inside, you don't necessarily want to be in front all the time in case it slips in behind you. But because you have an extra man on the other side, you can actually take that extra yard or two.
Yeah, and the coach will point against any team that kind of has a sweeper or against a spare man from a red card or whatever. It's always to try and work at multiple levels up the field before you deliver, because you can hit space either side of the spare man because he's got too much space to cover. But if you hit it from deep, he'll read it. And against Tadhg, I genuinely feel he's the best at doing that in the game. Yeah,
and like as I said from the opening, it wasn't just necessarily Tadhg covering back. And I think that's really important. We just highlighted Tadhg here because they're probably the more obvious clips. But like, I thought Neil Montgomery was absolutely fantastic. Yeah. He kind of reminded me like of a Will O'Donoghue who kind of sits deep and also protects his half back line. But the amount of times that he sat and actually stopped the ball from going into the half back line was really, really important.
Yeah, no, it's the link up between the half back line and the midfield was super impressive. I just felt I got the sense that it was joined up thinking the whole way up the field for Waterford, and I think they were all singing off the same hymn sheet. And to me, that's the winner of the game.
And ironically enough, before we move on to the next set of clips, like the last time that Kilkenny disrupted Limerick, it was on that basis where they'd half over the line of Walter Welch, TJ, and I think it was Donnelly. Big, tall, 6 foot plus fellas that were actually putting the puck out under pressure, breaking it down to themselves, and then getting onto it. And Waterford tried to do something similar today. But on that, it's not all doom and gloom, I don't think, for Cork. Maybe it was the fact that Cork expected to win, and probably expected to win by a serious enough margin, let's be perfectly honest about it, because Waterford's start to the league has been very poor, and even last year, probably wasn't good in the middle games. But just going to the Cork's play, like I think that if Cork used inside line more and used the space more, it would have been more fruitful for him. Here is Conor Lehane on the right hand side of the pitch. It's actually the Cork's left hand side, but as we look at here's the right hand side. All day in the first half, Conor Lehane had that much room. For some reason, they didn't hit him. And in the second half, it was the very same. The left-hand side of the pitch was redundant, and I can't understand how they didn't use it more.
Yeah, and I suppose then what was hurting Cork as well then was their striking. Lehane had 4 goals at the posts with plenty of space, and he missed all, and it was only his 5th effort that actually went over. So there was a bit of a combination of not using the personnel. Here's Hoggy on the ball. But
that was actually a point. I was actually standing behind it. He was very
they waved away. Okay.
Yeah. I was absolutely thrilled. But as we can see this one here, like the amount of room that was on that side of the pitch, and when they got the ball into the lads, they actually caused Waterford trouble. Like here's a really good example where like they break out a defence, and that's what you expected of Cork. But when they hit the ball in long and they go direct over the half-back line, they actually caused us trouble. Even though at this stage, I think that we had 2 extra defenders. We actually struggled.
Yeah. And see, Alan Connolly was fighting for everything at that stage as well. He was really trying to dig Cork out of a bad hole there. And then Downey, beautiful ball. But look at the platform he's hitting that from. He's hitting it from the 65. He's not hitting it back on the 45.
Also, he's moving, getting the ball. He's actually moving when he's getting the ball, and it's creating trouble inside.
Yeah. And Connolly again, straight in. But no, I think there was a lot of positives for Cork. I don't think you don't lose by 3 points and have an absolute nightmare. So, like, they did have really good aspects to it. 2 hammer blows in the end. So I don't think it's all bad, but they do need to use the ball better, and especially when there's space there, you have to hit.
So I don't even think, like, I think the one ball that went into Patrick Cork in the first half was actually a point. It was way wide, but like the one ball he got in front, he caused trouble. Similar enough, like towards the end and in the first half, when Connolly got the ball in, he caused trouble. So I just kind of struggle at times to understand why they weren't using him.
Well, like the Waterford defensive setup is the key, like, so because when you see Tadhg de Búrca, when he's in your line of sight, or whoever it was, even if you had Darragh Lyons dropping back a bit, like when he's in your line of sight, you choose a different option. You don't want to go over, because if it goes short, it's a bad news, and you want to keep it out of that 6-box area. So yeah, no, I can see why they chose not to, but they'll have to be brave the next day.
But the status quo wasn't working for them either, though. Like, as in what they were doing wasn't actually working. So, like, if they mix it up a small bit, even like you'd wonder at times, like Patrick Horgan is actually decent in the air. They didn't even try to like put the ball in high. Like Eula Daly hadn't played a lot of matches. Either had Conor Prunty. Like they were very like match poor in terms of how much time they've played. They didn't even try to do anything there. Whereas like the Jamie Barron goal, go back to the first point, like Davey was very smart in how he set up. He put Jamie on Coleman to run him, knowing that Coleman actually didn't play games because obviously he had a broken jaw. So the first thing Jamie done was he looped out around him, brought him for a run around the field, and then got in on goal.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of it though is when you see a full forward line not being served. A lot of the time, it's not that they didn't want to hit the ball; it's that they couldn't hit the ball. A lot of the time, it's your half back line just do not have the time or the space to operate. And it's typically the opposition that's forcing that. And that was Waterford that were doing that.
Yeah. So that's actually a fair point. It's a fair point. Yeah. Have you a couple of clips from me, Séamus?
So above in Ennis, in what was the Clash of the Titans, one of the most hyped games I've actually come across in such a long time. It lived up to a lot of it in some ways, in how the game turned in the end. But yeah, Limerick were not on the pace of the game for the vast majority of the game. So just set up a bit of context for the clips that are coming. The wides that a lot of people kind of mentioned as the real source of Limerick's bother in the first half, and even the start of the second half, the first 10 minutes of the second half, they had 12 wides racked up by the 10th minute of the second half. A lot of the time, that's not actually the execution of the shot. It is deciding to take the shot in the first place. So where you're taking your shots from. Limerick were hitting a lot standing from the 65 near the sideline. That's not the scoring area. Where Paul Kinnerk wants the ball hit, he wants the scoring zone to be a nice big square around the 45. You want to be able to work the ball in there and shoot from around there. And that normally takes pace and runners. Clare didn't allow that in the first half, and Limerick weren't doing it. So what I've got a few clips lined up here is the Limerick go forward ball. John Kiley was saying it after the game. He said they struggled to get go forward ball. It's a rugby term really, but really it's just the ball being taken at pace going forward. And there's some really good examples of the changes that Limerick made 10 minutes into the second half coming to fruition. So puck out down top of Cian Lynch, wins the break, but look who's coming off his shoulder. Cathal O'Neill. Cathal O'Neill and Cian Lynch switched places. Cian was playing midfield for the first half. Cathal was in the half-hour line. He comes off the shoulder, squares it to O'Dollig. O'Dollig came on for Séamus Flanagan 10 minutes into the second half. Could have had a goal. Set for his first championship point. Quilligan then was kind of forced into long ball a lot, and we might touch on that a little bit later. But in the first half, when Clare were doing well on that, they were getting the ball to ground and winning the breaks. But Limerick are set up better here. Hannon gets the ball to ground, and Kyle Hayes going forward.
But even the amount of Limerick bodies we have around that.
Yeah, look, watch the number of Limerick shirts there, and look what Kyle Hayes chooses to do. Direct running, going forward, reminds me of his run against Cork 3 years ago, where he scored an incredible goal. But Conor Boylan here, he came on again. He came on for Tom Morrissey. Look at the run, the acceleration off the shoulder here. Diarmuid Ryan realises it too late, can't catch him, and then a poorly timed challenge free in. Conor Boylan had a massive impact in the game. But at that pace off the shoulder wasn't there in the first half.
You actually can't mark that though, Séamus. When someone is running at you at pace, you actually can't mark it.
Yeah, and then Aidan McCarthy. You don't want Aidan McCarthy under a long puck out, or you so clearly let it down him. Then look at the walking out, look at the hands, Limerick get it out the field. And then when they actually do get Clare in a position to turn over ball, You can actually see it here now. We're going to freeze it. So that's Barry Nash going forward. That was one of the first turnovers in the middle of the field that Limerick had in the whole game. And so Barry, using his pace, attacking cornerback, and who's off his shoulder again? Cathal O'Neill. So that just, for me, was something that Clare weren't allowing in the first half. That's something that Limerick weren't even trying to do. And they just, I would say, it was part of the turning of the game. So poor free here, I would say, from Aidan McCarthy.
But like we don't equate that to Clare. Like we equate like very kind of measured, like passes, setups, freeze, cuts. They know what they're doing. Yeah. Like for me, that's not the Clare way.
Cathal O'Neill then finds Hegarty. Hegarty switched all over the place. He was the best Limerick player on the field on Sunday. He won it over Hogan, direct run at goal, nightmare. And here we have, so Adam English came on for Will O'Donoghue, would you believe, in the 59th minute. So normally Limerick don't take off Will O'Donoghue. Will O'Donoghue never leaves the field. But Adam English was superb. Breaks through 3 Clare players there. Gets a great ball into O'Donnell, who loses Cleary. And he's makes a hard work of it, but it's a great finish. Quilligan will be disappointed, but to me, that's all about Adam English and his pace from the back. You can see here again then the setup. So this was immediately after that O'Donnell goal. So Quilligan goes long. Look at the condensed Clare forwards. They're not winning it. There's too many Limerick jerseys there. And my man, Adam English from the Doon Club, he's going to break a tackle here. Look, straight through my Cathal Malone. Very, very difficult to do that. Off the shoulder to Cian Lynch. And this is something that just does not happen in inter-county hurling. You've got, look, Dave McInerney comes up short. Conlon is left in the middle. Nobody has Hegarty. And look at the space. Like it
kind of reminds you of Lahan and the amount of space he had for the Waterford game. Because of so much movement now, and players are switching and they're not just staying in one position, every so often will allow somebody to get in behind.
Yeah, it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare for backs. That communication piece that we were highlighting for Tadhg de Búrca earlier, to get that communication right, or to get it wrong in that instance, was the Hegarty piece. But then we got Cian Lynch again back away. He came into the game when he started getting on ball, and then Declan Hannon. Look at the vision here. He was looking to play off his left, decided to play off his right to O'Donnell, and again, where's Hegarty? Who's marking Hegarty? This time it's Diarmuid Ryan trying to pick him up, and Conlon's in the middle wondering, lads, who's got this fella?
Yeah.
And that was a platform that Limerick did not have in the first half. So,
but the key thing here, though, Séamus, is like Limerick have a game plan. Everyone knows what the game plan is. We know what it is. It's very hard to break the game plan. Okay, we know what Clare are about, and we know what their game plan broadly is as well. But like, it looked like for me that Clare actually slightly went off script from what they're used to doing and going in long and bunching. Whereas Limerick actually stuck to the plan, and that ultimately meant that there's a difference.
You can see that, and there's the question then is right. So then we've kind of debate that did Clare bottle this, or did Limerick unlock something that they didn't have? So there's truth in both, right? And exactly what you said. You stick to good habits and you stick to your plan when you've confidence in your system, right? When you have confidence in your system, confidence in your plan. And you feel like doing that over and over again means you'll actually reap results in the end. But for Clare, and we've got good examples here, I felt that Quilligan inside in goals was left too often with no option, but to go long and direct. With Starks, you've actually got what he did successfully in the first half. He isolated Peter Duggan one-on-one with Diarmuid Burns in the first half and got 3 results out of it. 2 of them were 2 clean wins and 1 of them was a free. But this time we got breaking ball. Limerick were on the breaking ball and they got it away. This is what they weren't using. When you got that channel of space was there, and in the round robin again of the Munster last year, they hit it repeatedly to Malone, to
Tony Kelly. Tony Kelly. That is Tony Kelly's bread and butter, and also like that is where they set their platform.
Yeah, and so when you ignore that, then and it goes long, those Limerick jerseys were all over them, and we don't see this from Clare. This condensed forward setup. They normally like one-on-ones. They like then fast players coming into breaking ball. But like we've got 6 Limerick defenders in that square there. So like to me, it was done over and over again, and it's the sign of a team who are a little bit fatigued, and I would say even as much mentally as physically. This Limerick matchup it means an awful lot to these Clare players. They've had a long run in the league, and when they start drifting away from processes that they've been long established, they start doing this. They start going long, and when they start going long, and the Limerick defence is well set up, there's no space to operate.
And like, yeah, to be fair to Limerick, they were 9 points down at one stage. Like for most other teams, particularly away from home and going to Ennis is a hard place to go to. Like to get a result from that and to do it in the fashion they did is a fair statement.
Yeah, and it's also a hallmark of it's a hallmark of their ability to play right to the end of the games. And you can see like the last 2 championship games against Tipperary, for instance, they've turned around 9 and 10 point deficits to the point where I'd say Tipperary are, I don't know what they're expecting when they come to the Gaelic grounds. Do they need to be 15 or 20 points up in the second half, or that's what they're facing going to the Gaelic grounds? But for me, there was a mixture there of Clare getting away from what they've established and what they're good at and what troubles Limerick, that off platform movement, that short midfield, that
the one-on-ones that they often get inside, Shane O'Donnell in space, Peter Duggan inside, one-on-one.
And so that's where people are talking about. Did they bottle it? Their shape then fell apart because they were drifting way too far up the field and taking the space out of their forward. So for me, that comes from long puckouts, because long puckouts pushes everybody up the field. And then when the ball is turned over, as a cornerback, the far end, what are you marking? Tons of space.
Yeah. And the other side of it though as well is like, it's strange because even if you watch like the underage teams like Clare, minor, under 20, etc., they have this very defined DNA on how they play. As you said earlier on, they have small, slight, fast fellas that they generally put into space, and they're incredibly good at actually finding space. Their hurling is really good. And some of those clips in particular, like they really highlighted that Clare looked fatigued.
And it was a surprise to me, especially with the tackle count in the last 20 minutes. It just went south. And sometimes it's not physical fatigue that you don't decide to make that run. It's a mental fatigue that you're like, oh, you know what? Instead of making that run into space, I think he's going to hit it long. I'm just going to wait here for the break. And then what you do then is you haven't cleared any space for anybody. You've actually just sat in the space, and you're part of a problem now instead of aiding the solution. So unfortunately, that happens in games when we're talking about momentum shifts. That's what it is. It's sometimes one team chooses to drift away from what they do well.
And I think that you actually said it earlier on, and it's actually a key point. When Limerick made the changes, it seemed to bring a different dynamic. They even switched, as you said, to the likes of Cian Lynch into different positions, and that made a massive difference. And I think it was kind of something similar to the other game, as in like the Waterford Cork game. In the space of 12 minutes, Cork took off Harnedy, Lahan, and Patrick Horgan. Like they're 3 go-to older lads with experience. So within 12 minutes, those guys were gone. And just slightly after that, they took off Coleman, who's their real leader in the back. So like it was a strange kind of, maybe they were trying to like hold the energy for this coming week. I'm not too sure. But like the changes make a massive difference. And it's probably something that we don't talk about enough is the importance of a bench.
Yeah. And even just as a defender, so defenders normally typically feel it more because you're after playing 50 minutes, like knuckles to the wall hurling between fullback Conor Cleary and Aaron Gillan. It felt like WWE wrestling at one stage, right? Imagine then switching from marking Gillan for Cleary to marking O'Donnell, who has no interest in a physical contest. He just wants to move. And that, unfortunately, that actually led to the second goal. So it's one of those things where changes just bring a different personnel group and it may be a different way of doing something that unsettles the opposition. And when it works, great. You've got Limerick's impact from the bench on Sunday. And when it doesn't work, I would say that a lot of Cork's changes at the weekend. I was surprised when Luke Meade and Robbie O'Flynn came on that they didn't make much of an impact.
I was expecting a lot out of both. Obviously, Robbie O'Flynn in his pace and he's very direct running, whereas Luke Meade is kind of like Cian Lynch. He's kind of like that player that finds space and brings other people into it. But yeah, slightly disappointed. Anyway, we're probably slightly over time. Séamus, it's been a pleasure, as always.
Perfect. Lovely, Noel.
I hope you enjoyed the conversation. And just to remind viewers that Dean and Aaron are on later on today. They're going to talk with the big ball, which Séamus apparently was very good at back in the day. there's probably pressing matters with Donegal's great victory over Derry the weekend, so they'll have plenty of good content to cover. So from Séamus and myself, thanks very much for listening, and we look forward to seeing you next week.